what we want from our federal government. The founders, literally the colonists asked the question, what should the role of government be? And they didn't like the role of the king. I'll tell you what, from my estimation and by others, the role of the king was rather minor to what the king in Washington is doing to us today. But there is no doubt this government could not be this big if we had not allowed the control of money to get out of the hands of the marketplace and out of the hands of something of real value. And of course that occurred in 1913 with the introduction of this notion that we should have a Federal Reserve System. They do a lot of mischief, and the very first thing that we should be demanding, which I've been demanding for years, and we got a partial of it done, that is they need a full-fledged audit to find out exactly who their buddies are and who's getting the bailouts. And the Fed, right, that is it. So you knew the next step. Very good. But the Fed will be ended, but it'll be ended like when we have to come home from overseas. But the thing that I would like to do is help prevent that crisis from coming, you know, where we end up literally with runaway inflation. That is the great danger. The destruction of the dollar, the abandonment of the dollar, and a rapid transition into inflation. And that, since there's no foundation to our monetary system or economic system, that could happen rather rapidly any time. Right now, we're getting a reprieve. They're still taking our dollars, and the bubble, the bond bubble, and the dollar bubble is still building. But it should not reassure anybody, and it isn't, because the world is in flux. All you have to do is look at the news. You don't have to go to Greece to find out the unhappiness and the how disgruntled people are. All you have to do is to go to a few of our cities. So people are becoming very much aware of a serious problem. The big question is, what are we going to replace it with? Hopefully, we will have the right explanation to replace it with the proper form of government, the kind of answers that our founders gave us. And they wrote a document which was intended in no way to restrict you. It was written to restrict the federal government. But as long as there is a Federal Reserve System and is allowed to exist, it facilitates the deficit financing. If you had sound money, if you couldn't print money out of thin air, and you had somebody that wants to spend a lot of money on an entitlement system in order to buy votes, or a lot of money to be spent on policing the world to satisfy some special interest, we could tax, but there wouldn't be enough money, and then we could start borrowing. There still wouldn't be enough money, and that's when they resort to the inflation. The amazing thing is that our government and our country has gotten away with it for so long, but the world has trusted us because we have been and still are probably the wealthiest country in the world, and we have a lot of weaponry, so there's a false illusion that we'll be there forever. But now that we're the biggest debtor in the history of the world ever, that we know that this end is coming to this, and we have to replace it with something. So it is the basic questions we have to ask. What should the role of government be, and what does liberty mean? Does liberty mean something to us? Are we frightened by it? Do we feel insecure? Do we want our government to take care of us from cradle to grave and make sure that that they will protect us from all dangers? You know, basically, we're not safe because we have a big government. We're not safe because there are a lot of policemen. We're safe basically because most people assume that they have to protect themselves, and one of the reasons we were given the Second Amendment, you know, to make sure we were safe. Unfortunately, in my lifetime, there's been a transition away from way we one time even looked at our local police, let alone the federal police. We have 100,000 federal bureaucrats now who regulate us in our property and march into our businesses, and they're carrying guns. I would say those are the guns that we ought to regulate the guns of the bureaucrat. But even the local authorities have become more authoritarian the way they enforce what they consider the legitimate laws. Right now, there are 50,000 break-ins by police without proper search warrant that are sting operations looking for somebody that might be smoking cigarettes or smoking marijuana. So they break into these houses, and I read a terrible story today of one of these operations. They broke in, and it was in an ex-Marine's house. He's been to Iraq, and he put his family in a closet, so he pulled his gun, but he heard somebody banging on the door and busting in. So he had a gun in his hand, and the door, he finally opened the door, and he never shot a shot. He didn't even take the safety off to his gun, and he ended up with 32 bullets in his head and in his body. And he had nothing in his house. So what are we doing to ourselves? You know, yes, we take an oath to defend our Constitution against all enemies foreign. But right now, I really fear for the destruction of my liberty and your liberty from domestic threat today. Not only did the founders understand exactly what self-ownership meant, they also translated that into seeing that liberty was a whole piece. It wasn't in parts. Today, we sort of break it up. We have economic liberty and personal liberty. We actually even have freedom of speech broken up into two places. We have political speech and advertising or commercial speech. But speech is speech, and freedom is freedom, and economic freedom is the same as personal liberty. It shouldn't be mixed up. So we have to put that back together again, and we have to have the confidence that a free society is the best. And right now, I'm afraid that we're probably on the minority side of this, believing that only government can take care of us. So we have to have a new understanding and a new conviction that what we want to have is to be able to live in a free society and have the right to our lives and the right to our bodies and the right to the fruits of our labor. This will give us the prosperity that we really want. And I believe that if you translate that into the proper foreign policy, this is what is going to give us peace as well. If we can have a system of peace and prosperity, how can we lose the argument? So if we don't do this, the problems are going to get much, much worse, and there will be more undermining of liberty. And in that case, then it's going to become more chaotic. If we don't do something about it and get a handle on it, my meager suggestion in the campaign right now on getting a handle on the budget is in the very first year, cut $1 trillion out of the budget and get serious about it. I start with getting rid of 5 of the departments. There's too many departments in Washington. We don't need them. And I cut the military budget. See, I don't say defense. I don't want to cut defense. The military budget down to $500 billion, and they're nearly hysterical because in Washington, you're not even allowed to cut a nickel out of the budget, whether it's the Democrats or the Republicans, because then you're un-American and you do not support the troops. The one thing that I'm proudest about in our campaign, last go-around and this go-around, actually it's even more so, is the fact that I have been accused of not supporting the troops and that I'm unpatriotic and un-American because I won't support these wars. But when it comes to donations, I have the 3 top groups of individuals. You can look on the computer and put them in a category on what their occupation is. The top category of donations coming from individuals come from the U.S. Air Force. The second is the U.S. Army. And the third is the U.S. Navy. So this whole notion that people go into the military just to go and fight wars, useless wars that aren't even declared, is complete nonsense. They're willing to defend our country, but they don't want to just go to war for the sake of war. They think it's good sense to say, let's go rarely, and you have to go win it and do it properly, make a proper declaration, but make sure we really have an enemy and don't make it so vague. And that's coming from our military people. Now, there is another candidate, and I'll let you guess who it is, but he's topping the polls right now. And we looked at his top 3 donations, and they all came from 3 big banking institutions. I wonder if they expect to get some special benefits from the Federal Reserve or just what? Another bailout. But we do live in crucial times, and we do need a re-energized defense of liberty. We need to understand what it is, put it back together, because we did have a wonderful test in this country. We had the freest country and the most prosperous country. We had the largest middle class ever. But it's not there anymore. The middle class is shrinking. The poor are growing more numerous. The rich are getting richer, the small number, and most of them are making money off the system. So this is being challenged. But we now had that experiment. We had, a great system, but now we don't have that. And if you think about it historically, freedom has not been, overly successful in that not many countries really enjoyed it. Even today, think of how many countries do not have real freedom. And also we don't have real freedom anymore, but there are so many that throughout history that has been that way. Most of history has been dominated by tyranny. And today, the Americans are annoyed and upset and confused at times, but I don't know if they clearly understand that the major problem is we're having less and less freedom and more tyranny, and it's going in the opposite direction, and we need to change that direction. That is my goal and my intent, to fight for the cause of liberty, to make sure that we have the maximum amount of freedom and the maximum amount of prosperity in this country. Thank you very much.
Glad you're here. Thank you for coming. Thank you for coming. Thank you for coming also for the interview on Radio Free Market a couple months ago. Pardon me?
I interviewed you a couple months ago.
Okay, very good.
You're going to be my first goal.